Welcome to the Multifarious Man Podcast, episode 603, Once More with Feeling. As always, I am your host, John Michael Vincent, aka the Multifarious Man. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Multifarious Man and find links to all previous episodes of the show along with essays and reviews at www.multifariousman.com. On today's episode, I am talking about characters from TV, movies, and books that we empathize the most with. For me, this has always been the key to whether or not I will stay with a story. Basically, if I don't care about any of the characters, then I am not staying around for the long haul. In fact, this week's episode title comes from season 6 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So they did a musical episode in season 6, I believe episode 7, called Once More with Feeling. Now, this is one of my favorite shows of all time, and it continues to resonate because I truly cared what happened to the characters and was happy to follow along on their journey. Plot, story, and spectacle, in this case, a musical episode, will get you nowhere if the character foundation is flawed. Hello, Cop Rock. Also, stick around to hear what I'm recommending for you to read, watch, or listen to. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Numerous and varied, greatly diverse and manifold. All the things I want to say that never been told. Dina Sinatra to Drake and Pharrell. What I'm listening to this week, you can never tell. Bogey and Bacall, even Meryl Streep. The devil wears Prada, even the big sleep. It doesn't matter where you stand, I'm the multifarious man.
Welcome back to the Multifarious Man Podcast, episode 603, Once More with Feeling. As I mentioned in the intro, this episode is about characters from TV, movies, and books that I empathize the most with. Now, what is empathy? Dictionary.com says this is the intellectual identification with or vicarious experiencing of the feelings, thoughts, or attitudes of another. This is not to be confused with sympathy. It's not about how you feel about the person. It's more about understanding what they feel and why they feel. A character's emotional journey is important because it informs their actions and motivations. Why do they love, hate, protect, or sometimes kill? What are they afraid of, or what makes them envious? It's the reason why we sometimes root for the villain rather than the hero. Spoiler alert, Hannibal Lecter escapes at the end of Silence of the Lambs. Even though he perpetrated several heinous acts during the course of the film, I'm pretty sure many in the audience, including yours truly, smiled knowing that not only did he escape, he was able to extract a measure of revenge against one of his antagonists. So, without further ado, here are some of the characters that I empathize the most with. So if you've listened to this show over the years, you won't be surprised that the first two characters come from a science fiction show. This is probably, next to mysteries and detectives, it's probably my favorite genre. So leading off are the characters of John Crichton and Aaron Sutton from the TV series Farscape. Farscape was a sci-fi channel show that was produced by Jim Henson Company, yes, of Muppets fame, that aired from 1999 to 2003 on the Sci-Fi Channel. Before it was spelled differently, it was still Sci, S-C-I, Fi, F-I. And it told the story of an American astronaut, John Crichton, that entered a wormhole during a test flight. Now, he ends up on the other side of the universe. There, he encounters a group of fugitives on a living ship. Now, like Dorothy and her unceremonious arrival in Oz, John Crichton accidentally kills the brother of the general of the warlike race known as the Peacekeepers. Now, although I have never accidentally killed someone, I can imagine what it feels like to be disliked or even hated, and you have no idea why. Now, add that to the fact that John is a stranger in the strangest of lands, and you can immediately, imagine what it's like to be in his shoes. Now, Aaron's son, on the other hand, is one of the Peacekeepers. Now, she's impacted by John Crichton's arrival because due to their physical interaction at some point in the premiere episode, it leads her to be labeled as infected. And just like John Crichton, suddenly she's marked for death. Now, she's been indoctrinated from birth and now finds herself hated and hunted by the only family that she has ever known. Now, I understand the distrust they both felt for each other as enemies that eventually became allies out of necessity and friends out of choice. As the only two human characters, I found it easy to understand that their reactions to their circumstances. Now, this show in general, Farscape, was an amazing story. It had ongoing, each episode kind of, there were standalone episodes, but there was a ongoing storyline. And to see how John Crichton and Aaron Sun, how their circumstances changed, how their view of each other changed over time, all the while they're on this ship with, amazing creatures that are just totally different from them. So you're trying to adapt to the situation you're in. You're on the run. Your life is on the line, and you have to learn to depend on others. I'm sure many people can think of scenarios they've been in, whether it's in school, on a school project, it's not life or death, but you're depending on people from different backgrounds who don't know anything about you or may not care to know anything about you, but sometimes you just have to make adjustments to go along. If these characters were people you didn't care about or creatures or whatever that you didn't care about, the show probably wouldn't have gripped you as much. I mean, you can only go so far with space battles and fights and things along that line. But if you don't care whether a character lives or dies, then it's like it doesn't matter what you put them through. So the important part for this show is the characters. And it's not even a matter of them being likable, because there can be a despicable character that goes through this. But for me, the story of John and Aaron really made it worth it. So if you haven't had a chance to see this series, check it out if you can. It's about 88 episodes. And then, when it was canceled, unceremoniously canceled before they could resolve a storyline, they were able to resolve that storyline a few years later with a movie that kind of closed out the story. So definitely check out the series Farscape, and then the TV movie, The Peacekeepers War, I think it was called. So that's the first two characters. Now, for the next character, imagine you are born to fulfill a prophecy, and your whole life you are told that you are the chosen one. Sure, this is pretty much the tale of many stories, from Star Wars to Lord of the Rings. There's always some kind of prophecy. Now, imagine you are a princess raised in a proverbial ivory tower, and you grow up to be a spoiled brat. Now, this is where we find the next character on my list, Princess Eloradan. Now, Eloradan is one of the main characters in the Shadow War novels. They are Shadow Moon, Shadow Dawn, and Shadow Star. Now, this is the literary sequel to the 1988 Ron Howard directed film Willow, based on a short story by George Lucas. Now, the movie starred Val Kilmer, Joanne Whaley, and Warwick Davis. Star Wars fans know him well as the title character. In the movie, Willow is tasked with protecting the infant Eloradan. And the novels take place maybe about 13 years later, and he must once again come to her aid. Now, no longer an infant, Eloradan is a lonely girl that once again has the fate of the world on her shoulders. Now, having been a teenager, I remember well what it was like to feel like everything you experienced was the end of the world. You're changing physically and emotionally, all the while you're trying to figure out your place in your small world. Now, Eloradan is surrounded by literal strangers, and she doesn't know the one person that has known her all her life. Willow was there when she was born, and in and out as she was growing up, but she didn't know him. Now, as a parent of teenage girls, I know what it's like to try to relate to a young woman that you remember seeing take her first breaths in the world, first steps. They go from wanting you to carry them everywhere to pushing you away when you try to give them a hug in public. Now, this character resonated with me when I first read the books in 1995. Is when the first one came out through when the final one was released. And I still have fond memories of the adventure. So you have a character that, goes from a spoiled teenager and you see her develop. Now, where the empathy comes from, like I said before, is I know what it was like to be a teenager, to kind of feel insecure or to feel lost, to varying degrees. It was not all sadness, and it wasn't all rainbows as growing up as a teen, but you can understand what it's like trying to fit in and feeling like everything is the end. So if you haven't had a chance to read this book, and if you're a fan of the movie, I definitely recommend it. Now, I know there's been talk of them actually developing a new Willow series. Now, I don't know if it's going to follow the storyline of the novels or if it's just going to take place in that world. Not sure if Ron Howard or George Lucas are still connected, but I do believe Warwick Davis is set to play the character of Willow of God again. So hopefully I'll have more information on that in future episodes, because I definitely would be interested in revisiting this world. And I'm definitely going to take the time to reread the novels, hopefully this year. So I gave you 2 characters so far, or I gave you 3 characters so far. 2 from a TV show, 1 from a book. Now I turn to the silver screen. Now, last on my short list is the character of Moses, not from the Bible, from the sci-fi, surprise, surprise, movie Attack the Block, starring John Boyega. Now, this came out in 2011, and this was before John Boyega joined the Star Wars universe. Now, the premise of this movie is simple. What happens when a teen gang in South London has to defend their block from an alien invasion? Moses and his crew are small-time, bottom of the thug food chain. I mean, they rob and steal from anyone unfortunate to cross their small circle of influence. Now, they're used to being looked down upon by their neighbors and local authorities, which is all part of the vicious cycle of the poverty that they find themselves within. Moses may be a young punk, but he's the proverbial criminal with a heart of gold. He's loyal to a fault, but he's a small fish in a small pond, and there are bigger fish. Now, what happens when aliens, again, this is a sci-fi movie, pick your housing project as the staging area for their invasion? Now, growing up in New York City in the projects, Rochdale Village to be exact, and yes, I know, it's not Marcy or 40 Projects or Cabrini Green. For those of you that know, you know. But it was still a housing project. So your building, your floor, your section was your whole world. And, you were fiercely loyal, or you protected your territory. So you make a wrong decision, and it's easy to become a Moses or one of the real sharks. Moses was used to not being listened to, but when the aliens start showing up, he has to make life and death decisions on a grander scale. So, you get to see glimpses of the boy that has been forced to be a man. And it's usually when they have interactions with adults. When they're in their small group, he has the bravado. He has the anger. He has I'm the king of the pack. But then, when you see interaction with some of the older kids in the neighborhood, or even, the authorities, you see the little boy shining through. And I think sometimes, in life, people don't see our young black men as kids. Yes, they can be capable of, of certain, really heinous acts. But, sometimes you have to remember that these are kids with developing minds. And I think that's part of the charm of this story, Attack the Block. Now, the same insecurities we all go through on a day-to-day basis are amplified when you're a teenager. I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, speaking of Eloradan character from the Shadow Chronicles novels. Now, I don't believe it's a coincidence that the character is named Moses, as he is an unexpected hero and leader that is responsible for leading his crew to the Promised Land, which in this case is surviving an actual invasion. It's definitely worth checking out. Some of the side characters really shine through, but of course, John Boyega really does. This was his star-making turn where people stood up and took notice, before he went on to other things and becoming a known name, and how it's small budget film. It's fun. It's exciting. I think it's still currently available on Amazon Prime if you have it. So there you have it. And I'm sure I could fill up entire episodes just picking a single character from, which is a very long list from many different shows that I love, many books, many movies. And I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear your list, you the audience, of your top 3 empathetic fictional characters. So you can leave a voice message. Remember, we added the voice line now, so you can leave a voice message for the show on Google Voice Line at 904-419-3561. Again, that's 904-419-3561, or you can send a DM at Multifarious Man on Instagram and Twitter and just mention episode 603, empathetic character. I would love to hear from you. So when we return, I will talk about what is a uniquely New York story that has pretty much got me hyped right now as I'm watching it. Welcome back to the Multifarious Man podcast, episode 603, Once More with Feeling. And before I close out today's show, I want to recommend an exciting series that, literally has me anxiously awaiting each week's episode. It's in season 2, and, after powering through season 1, and having to wait until season 2, which was released in August, and they're releasing an episode each week. So to give the background, in spring of '94, I was still in college, City University of New York. I took a trip to Finland with a few friends from school. Now on that trip, we primarily played Snoop Dogg's, and he was Snoop Doggy Dogg at the time, his debut album, Doggy Style. Pretty much the entire hip hop world was banging West Coast hip hop. You had a run, after the Chronic from Dre, and then Snoop had his debut on a single, and then he released his, anxiously awaited debut album. So even all the way in Finland, we were pumping this album. Now that fall, I heard Enter the Wu-Tang 36 Chambers for the first time. Now this was at a friend Duke's house, and he lived up the block from my dad's house in Laurelton, Queens. Duke, rest in power, and his good friend Steve were older than me and my good friends. Back then I was running around with Don, Tareem, and Al. We were all from Laurelton, around the same age, hung out all the time. But Steve and Duke would school us on a lot of different things, and they definitely always, put us on to that new music when it came out. Now, Wu-Tang was like nothing I had ever heard before. You got a whole clan. It seemed like all of Staten Island was in the group. The RZA, the Jizza, Old Dirty Bastard, Method Man, Raekwon, Ghostface Killer, Inspector Deck, You God, Master Killer. The show I'm talking about is Wu-Tang, an American Saga. Now, it's now in its second season on Hulu, and it tells the story of their rise to fame. Season 1 focused mainly on the backstories of the individuals. So it focused a lot on Bobby Diggs, aka the RZA, Raekwon, Ghostface Killer, Old Dirty Bastard, and Method Man. And of course, some of the other members, made appearances. And you could see, the struggles they went through, whether it was a project in Staten Island, family life, just trying to see you could see the influences that would later lead to what became Wu-Tang. Now, aside from the fact that I experienced this firsthand when it was happening, when they came out, I heard them when they first came out, was pumping. So it wasn't like I'm seeing it through someone else's eyes. I was there when Wu-Tang got big. I happened to be coming of age at the same time as them. And, what makes this story even more compelling, that it truly is, it really is an American saga. It's told from the point of view of young black men and their families. Now, RZA had the vision to assemble the unique parts of Wu-Tang, what became Wu-Tang. And as an executive producer, his style is all over the storytelling techniques. He back in '98, he scored his first movie, Ghost Dog. He's went on to score Quentin Tarantino movie. Why am I drawing a blank right now? Kill Bill. And learned a lot about storytelling techniques from Quentin Tarantino. He was in a movie, and I think he might have directed the sequel. I think it's The Man with the Golden Arm or something. I mean, it was Kung Fu flick, and if anyone knows Wu-Tang, their whole background, their whole everything into the Wu-Tang, even their names, it's from Kung Fu flicks. You grew up of a certain age. We watched a lot of Kung Fu flicks by the Shaw brothers, who were probably the biggest producers. We're talking about Into the 36 Chambers. We're talking about Flying Guillotine. We're talking about Five Deadly Venoms. So this is the kind of stuff they were watching, and it kind of, everything from the sounds of their music, the samples that RZA put together when he was creating beats, and just even their unique styles of rap. Everyone was very different. They all sounded differently, but yet together it just gelled. So learning about a group that is from my generation has made the experience even greater. For me, one of the most interesting things I learned is probably two of my favorite members of Wu-Tang, Raekwon and Ghostface Killer. They really were enemies. Serious enemies in the beginning, for reasons that you'll see when you watch the show, and the fact that they became such great friends. And in fact, if you ask me, some of the best individual albums outside of Wu-Tang, it was when they were together doing different projects, whether it was Raekwon on Ghostface's album or Ghostface on Raekwon's album. So that's the interesting part of the story, and just seeing how these young men came together and were able to put aside their differences to create something that was bigger than the individuals. And then because of it, they were able to all have individual success. So if you haven't had a chance to see this, it's definitely worth watching. The new season 2, they release new episodes each week on Wednesday. And I just watched another episode. So last week's episode was talking about how they put together that first single, Protect Your Neck. And then this week it was about trying to get airplay, and just seeing them, use different techniques, and how they really were in the streets grinding, trying to kick open doors that were usually reserved for big record labels, big distributors. So as an independent label without a distribution deal, to what ended up happening to them. So it's been exciting. Definitely check it out. Wu-Tang Saga, Wu-Tang and American Saga on Hulu. That's it for this week. again, once more with feeling. Definitely love to hear what anyone has to say. Any thoughts of characters that you empathize with. Again, you can leave a voicemail at the Google Voice line on 904-419-3561 or send me a direct message at multifariousman on Instagram and Twitter. With that, until next time, we'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. Until then, peace. The Multifarious Man podcast is produced and edited by Multifarious Man Productions. Your host is John Michael Vincent, aka The Multifarious Man. Original music and lyrics by John Michael Vincent.
Numerous and varied, greatly diverse and manifold. All the things I want to say that never been told. Dina Sinatra to Drake and Pharrell. When I'm listening to this week, you can never tell. Bogey and Bacall, even Meryl Streep. The devil wears Prada, even the big sleep. It doesn't matter where you stand, I'm the multifarious man.